This monochromatic dresser and nightstand had particle board bubbles on the tops, along with several gouged and scratched areas. You'll see how easily this damage can be repaired by even a beginner. I'm using my own recipe for all-in-one paint and mixing a custom glaze to make this particle board look like it's made of wood with the trendy finish you see in high-end furniture stores. You won't even recognize this set when I'm finished repairing and restyling it. To get started, I removed all the knobs and then cleaned everything with Crud Cutter. It was then rinsed with water. Since I was going to be changing the hardware, I filled in the holes with wood filler. I always overfill them so I can feather the wood filler into the surrounding area when it's sanded. The carving on the door was also filled in. For more information about how to fill in carving on wood furniture, watch the video I produced on that topic. It's posted on my channel, and I'll put a link to it at the end of this video. This dresser is 100% particle board. The way to determine what a piece of furniture is made of is simple. Just look at it from the back. When I'm inquiring about a piece of furniture posted on Facebook, I frequently ask them to take a close-up photo of the back so I can see what it's made of. As you can see, this top looks like it's made of pieces of sawdust glued together. In fact, that is how particle board is made. This furniture does not really have a veneer on it. It has some kind of coating that makes it kind of look like wood. I think it may just be the way it's painted. When particle board gets wet, it swells. Bubbles form wherever it gets wet. The nightstand looks like water was literally sprinkled on it and then allowed to sit long enough for the particle board underneath to get wet. These bubbles will never go away on their own. However, this can be repaired. I used an orbital sander with 80 grit sandpaper to get rid of all the bubbles. To ensure that the top will be smooth, feather the edges of the particle board bubbles. If you still see sharp edges, you need to keep sanding until the edges blend into the surrounding area. Next, sand with 150 to 180 grit sandpaper, and then finish with 220 or above sandpaper. Using this finer sandpaper closes the pores of the particle board and makes the top super smooth. This makes a big difference in the final finish, so don't skip this step. You can also sand it by hand, but of course it would take a lot longer. There have been several times when I noted bleed through on particle board furniture. This was only seen in areas where the raw particle board was exposed. Therefore, I always spray these sanded areas with shellac and then an oil-based primer. The order doesn't matter, but be sure that it's dry before you spray over it. Then go over the primed area with a crumpled up piece of brown paper bag or craft paper, using it like sandpaper to get rid of any rough areas on the surface. Since I was going to be using an all-in-one paint, I didn't prime the rest of the dresser or nightstands. I only primed and shellacked those areas with exposed particle board. The areas that were filled in with wood filler were now dry, so they could be sanded with 180 grit sandpaper using the orbital sander. As I sanded, I frequently ran my fingertips over the areas to ensure that the wood filler feathered into the drawer front. I sanded by hand a few areas because I was afraid if I sanded them with the sander, I'd be overly aggressive and remove too much of the filler. I'm always very picky about making certain that it's perfectly smooth and you can't see any indication of the prior hole. I also make certain that there's no mound of wood filler that can be seen. It's not unusual for me to have to refill some areas with wood filler until I get it just right. If you've enjoyed this video and found it informative, I'd certainly appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up. This is very important for the success of my channel because it tells YouTube that it's of value and they'll then show it to other people. Thank you for watching and supporting my channel in this way. You'll note that I have many more videos that teach not only the basics of furniture refinishing, but I also show you some really unique ways to restyle furniture for your personal use or to flip it for a profit. I've developed my own recipe for all-in-one paint and have used it successfully on several furniture makeovers. However, since I'm using the Oops paint from the big box store, I use different brands of paint to make it each time. That's why I always perform a test to ensure that this particular combination of products used to make the all-in-one paint will be durable and resist scratching. I did a video comparing Beyond Paint with chalk paint. In that video, I performed several tests comparing Beyond Paint with chalk paint to evaluate their durability, scratch resistance, and wear. Those are the same tests I performed on the all-in-one paint that I mixed up for this dresser. If you would like to know what tests you could perform, just watch that video and then you can duplicate the tests that I did. This all-in-one paint I mixed up passed the test with flying colors, so I felt confident using it. The base paint I used was Interior Sherwin-Williams Ovation Plus paint in a flat finish. Since I was going to put a glaze over this, and since I was going to use a polyurethane in a satin finish, I really didn't want to have too much shine, so I was glad that it was flat, not a satin finish. It probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the paint had been satin though. It was an Oops paint, so I got it for only $9 for the gallon. The regular price was $40, and since it was paint and primer in one, the recipe I used was 2/3 cup of paint and 1/2 cup of water-based polyurethane. If the paint I purchased was a paint without a primer, the recipe would have to include primer, so I would use 1/3 cup of the paint and 1/3 cup of the water-based primer and 1/2 cup of the water-based polyurethane. I have used both recipes successfully. One thing that I found to be very important in making a successful all-in-one paint is that you need to start with a high-quality paint. I used a cheap paint that I got from Habitat for Humanity store, and it simply did not have the durability of the high-quality, expensive paint. Using Oops paint is obviously the cheapest option. However, even if you pay full price for the base paint, my recipe for all-in-one paint is still significantly cheaper than the all-in-one paints that you can purchase today. The color of the Oops paint, of course, is not on the container. I looked at some paint samples and found that it closely matches Bone White number PPG 1085-2, a PPG Glidden color from Home Depot. It actually resembles the color of raw wood, and that's why I chose it. If you can't find the exact color, you can always grab a piece of raw wood and take it to the paint department and ask them to color match it. I have done that before. I was now ready to begin painting. To ensure that there is no dust on the furniture that would end up in the painted finish, I wiped the dresser and nightstands with a cloth dampened with water. I used a synthetic bristle brush to paint the furniture. While I frequently thin chalk paint to make it go on smoother, that's not necessary with this recipe of all-in-one paint. It went on smoothly and covered well. When dry, I ran my hand over the surface and it felt smooth, so I didn't feel the need to sand it with a brown paper bag or craft paper. I dusted the furniture once again with a damp cloth and then applied a second coat of the all-in-one paint. Just to make certain that the paint was cured enough, I allowed it to sit overnight before applying the glaze. I recently refinished a dresser with a gold-colored glaze on the drawers. In that video, I tested 3 different ways to make glaze, and I found the one that I liked best for that dresser. This is the video if you'd like to see the difference between the DIY glazes I tested. Based on the success of that makeover, I decided to use the same glaze recipe for this dresser. The glaze that I used was Valspar Antiquing Glaze. It has no color in it, so you can add paint to mix up your own custom glaze. I used 2 different glazes for this furniture. I found that if I use some of the paint that was used on the furniture and the glaze, then the color always coordinates perfectly. I put about 1/2 cup of glaze in a plastic container and then added about 1 tablespoon of the Bone White All-in-One paint. 1 teaspoon of burnt umber craft acrylic paint was stirred in, and everything was stirred very well to combine thoroughly. This color was intended to be a little darker than the base color. The second glaze was made with 1 cup of the Valspar Antiquing Glaze because I found that 1/2 cup was barely enough to do the prior coat. I added 2 tablespoons of the Bone White All-in-One paint along with 2 teaspoons of burnt umber. After it was thoroughly mixed, I added a little more burnt umber until it was the color that I thought would look best. I later took samples of these 2 glazes to the store and found that the following PPG paint colors most closely match the custom colors I mixed. If you're feeling unsure about custom mixing these colors, you can get a paint sample mixed up at Home Depot of these 2 colors and simply add it to the glaze to make the same colors I used. If you're using paint samples to color your glaze, add about 2 tablespoons to 1 cup of glaze. Paint some of the base paint on a piece of scrap wood or foam core and then test the glaze to see if it's opaque enough. Add more paint to make it more opaque and more glaze to make it less opaque. This glazing technique creates a beautiful contemporary finish similar to the popular wood grain finish seen on Pottery Barn furniture. As you can see from the PB examples, you can use this on many different types of furniture. With this glazing technique, you can even make particle board look like wood. To create this 2-part glazed finish, I used a paintbrush or a chip brush to paint on the lightest glaze over the dried all-in-one base. I then used a brush I purchased on Amazon called a deck brush to lightly brush over the glaze, leaving soft brush strokes across the surface of the glaze. I made the brush strokes go in one direction so they resembled the grain of wood, using a sweeping motion from one edge to the other. I tried to keep the deck brush as dry as possible, so I wiped off any paint using a paper towel or dry cloth in between strokes on the furniture. I went over the entire dresser and both nightstands, brushing on the glaze with the paintbrush and then brushing it off with the deck brush. When I finished the first glaze, I let it dry overnight. I was concerned if I didn't let it dry thoroughly, the next coat of glaze would activate the first coat and simply make it dissolve. The second coat was applied with a chip brush because I wanted there to be spaces between the brush strokes, allowing the first coat of glaze to peek through. I immediately brushed over this second coat using a whisk broom, using long sweeping strokes from one edge of the furniture and ending with the far edge. This time I made certain the brush strokes made with the whisk broom were in one direction to resemble wood grain. I used light to moderate pressure on the whisk broom. Paint was cleaned off the whisk broom at frequent intervals with a paper towel or dry cloth. I went over the furniture applying the glaze and whisking it off in the same manner. Following the second coat, it looked like the furniture was completely transformed. Wow, I really love this finish. Once again, I let the last coat of glaze dry overnight, and then I used a car washing sponge to apply 3 to 4 coats of water-based satin polyurethane to everything. Of course, the poly was allowed to dry thoroughly before applying another coat. While the poly was drying, I painted the drawer pulls. I had some extra drawer pulls left over from a prior makeover, but they were silver, so I sprayed 2 coats of black flat paint on them. When the paint was dry, I gave them another 2 coats of lacquer to protect the paint and for added durability. The paint and lacquer were allowed to dry thoroughly before applying another coat. To me, the most anxiety-producing part of any makeover is drilling the holes for the drawer pulls. If I mess up, I know that I'll have to fill in the holes, sand them, paint them, and re-glaze the entire drawer front. Because of the drying time, it would probably take another 3 days to finish the flip. So while you're watching me drill these holes, you have to imagine my heart is beating a little faster, my blood pressure is a little bit higher, and I'm measuring everything about 10 times each to make certain I get it right. I use special drill bits to drill the holes, and I don't mention this very often in videos. They are called brad point drill bits because they have pointed tips that you can stab the furniture with before you begin to drill the hole. As a result, the drill bit stays where you want it and it doesn't wander over the surface. The end result is the hole is where you want it. When the last coat of sealer is dry, I installed the new drawer pulls and took photos for the Facebook Marketplace listing. Spoiler alert, this dresser and 2 nightstands sold within 4 days of listing for my full asking price of $650. The woman that purchased it paid an additional $125 for delivery to a city about 80 miles from me. I paid $50 for this entire set. So now, let's look at the before and after photos of this remarkable makeover that truly went from drab to dramatic. While you're looking at the photos, I want to share with you a milestone for my channel. I have 6,000 subscribers. I want to express my sincere appreciation to those of you who have shown your support for my humble little channel by subscribing or liking a video. Thank you. It was a huge leap of faith when I started my channel because I didn't know if anyone would even watch my videos, let alone like or subscribe. My channel is just me, myself, and I doing everything, and it takes a lot of my time not only to make over the furniture, but to videotape it and then edit all of the raw footage into something you can make sense of. In all honesty, it takes me twice as long to edit the video than it does to refinish the furniture. I work on my channel part-time because I'm also still working as a professional photographer. Since COVID, my business has decreased, so the added money from selling my furniture has helped to supplement my income. I really appreciate your comments because I get a little lonely doing this all by myself, so your comments and suggestions help to encourage me and spur me on. Once again, thank you. On the right, you'll see several makeovers that I referred to in this video that provide additional information about how to refinish, restore, and restyle furniture for your personal use or to flip it for a profit. Thank you for watching.